And okay. Oh, you see me?
Oh, look at you. We're both in a different location today. That's bizarre.
Yep.
Your hair looks great. You look like one of the Beatles or something.
Thanks, I guess.
Where are you at right now?
I'm at my grandmother's, hanging out with her,
Oh,
looking
perfect.
after her,
Right
just
on.
making sure she's okay, that type of thing.
Oh, that's right on. Are you inside or outside right now?
Outside, I'm down by White Rock. I can actually just see the ocean from my chair.
Oh, love that. I love White Rock for that. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Oh, right
For,
on.
Unfortunately, her spare bedroom is literally just a giant bed that takes up the entire room.
Nice. Nice. And that's where are you sleeping there?
Yeah, for now. Well, for last night.
Totally good. Can you see and hear me okay? Everything's
Um,
good?
I'm not having any issues. How about me on your end? I don't actually have a microphone. I'm trusting the computer to do the thing.
Me too. Yeah, that's totally cool. I just want
Actually, okay.
awesome. All right. Let me give you, I just was
Oh,
only
you're
able
breaking up.
to get through chapter 12 and what's that, sorry?
Never mind. Yeah. I didn't. You broke up there, and I basically just got your back.
Oh, totally fair. Yeah. So I only was able to get through chapter 12. And if I understood correctly, the main thing, I read the whole thing, but you wanted me largely read page 1 to 4, if I'm not mistaken.
No. I finished the whole thing. I wanted you to
Oh,
read
good.
one to
Okay.
four the first time around.
Good. Then I did read the whole thing, and I just wanted to make sure I wasn't overthinking it, but I thought in case you want me to read the whole thing, I went ahead and read the whole thing. So
Yeah, I
good.
only said the 1 to 4 thing because at the time that's all I had ready.
That's what I thought. Yeah, I thought that was. I'm pretty sure that was last week. It's probably not the case this week. So, perfect. Okay. I love your pacing is in this chapter is really, really good. And what I mean by that is, your writing is so strong and often so you want to convey so much information that sometimes, as I've sort of reflected in the past, sometimes it can feel like a really big info dump, and there's so much stuff I'm trying to concentrate. There's a bit of that later in the chapter, in my opinion, but right off the bat, I want to point out 2 or 3 things you're doing here that I really like. First thing is a little thing that's really easy to fix. You use the word house 5 times in the first couple of paragraphs.
Ah,
That's just a matter of modifying sentence structure. For example, instead of saying large spikes of ice surround the house, you say it was surrounded by large spikes of ice. So I'll let you play with that. That's just a matter of it's first draft stuff. It strikes me as just typical first draft stuff. Love what you do here. Like this may go under the radar for some people. This doesn't go under the radar for me. The way you're sort of keeping this conversation largely between Julius and Ramona, simple. It's focused. First of all, I love what Julius says here. If Mr. Crazy over there survived whatever, killed everyone in the city, then we should be able to handle whatever it is, without defenses. However, if I'm wrong, these defenses could save our lives. And I'm like, that is a small thing, but a big thing, because what you're doing is you're saying, here's what Julius is doing. It's not overcomplicated. He's putting some precautions in place, and the explanation is really, really simple. Hey, we're probably okay, but just in case we're not, I'm going to make sure that we're taken care of. Number one, you explained it. So I'm not confused about what he's doing. Number two, the explanation is dead fucking simple and really, really easy to understand. And number three, it then sets up things like I'm carving a runic ward around the house. I don't need that explained to me. I understand that's part of what he's doing to protect the house. So you can, because you started off by explaining, here's generally what I'm going to be doing, Ramona. Anything he does after that doesn't require explanation. So that's a great little shortcut if you do need to present a lot of stuff. Plus, it creates really cool dramatic tension. Because what I'm thinking to myself is, oh, you mean there's a chance you'll need those defenses? And so as the reader, I'm like, ooh. So not only is it a great explanation, super simple, totally engaging, now it's making me curious and excited. And I'm like, oh shit, what's going to happen in this chapter? So it's whether you intended it to keep this simple or it's a happy accident. Those are the little tricks that I want to get writers to think about all the time, because sometimes writers like you or me, we want to share all this stuff with the reader or with a film, audience, whatever the case is. And we don't exactly know what to reveal when. We don't know how to parcel it out, which is totally normal. This is you at your best, in my opinion. You're keeping it clean. You're keeping it simple. And just the way it feels like a real conversation. It feels like two people, and I could even hear Ramona like, are we really going to need all this? And he's like, yeah, we might. So yeah, I'm going to do it. So I feel like I'm listening to two human beings having a real conversation where it's not just that information is being shared, but they feel like they're responding to that information the way people really would. Can you teach? And I love this, Ramona's like, hey, can you teach me? Which of course is something I would ask too. If I was in there, he's like, not today. And my first impulse was with what you say after that. I'm like, he just said he doesn't have time to do it today. So why is he going into an but it's not the same thing. It makes sense that he would say this. He's not teaching or anything. He's just explaining a little bit more about runes without overdoing it. And then you do something even cooler. So like, no, so you've given an explanation of what's going on in really simple terms. I feel like I'm listening to two people who feel like real human beings talking about it. She's eager to learn, of course. He doesn't have time, but he's affording her a bit of an explanation.
Well, he doesn't have time now.
What's that? Sorry?
He doesn't have time now. I specifically
Exactly.
left that open.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. And then the most exciting thing is, because I'm only interested in runes and all of this other stuff for so long. I'm interested in them. I want to learn more about these characters. So you have Dick bring it back, just like he should. I thought you were in Paris during the Nazi occupation. I mostly was, and even this explanation, but we had a runic gateway to London supplying the resistance with weapons. An intelligent, stupid thing wouldn't stay on for more than a minute. The Nazis bombed the site while I was still in the city. And I'm like, that's also golden. I got to highlight that because that's you again, not throwing too much information at me. And it's interesting to me. Like, one could argue, well, do we need to know about that? Well, it's not that we need to know about what he did in London during Paris. This isn't about what he did. This is about giving us a sense of who Julius is, what experiences he had, and so on. I was stuck back in London with no way back for 6. This is you. Look at what you did in 2 or 3 sentences. You managed to tell a complete story that wasn't too much and made me interested. It's a tangential story. It's not necessarily something that's going to come up again per se, but it's really simple. Yeah, I was in Paris. This is why I was there. This is what happened. The end. And you do it in a couple of sentences. So again, the pacing that you're giving me up to this point, it's just enough to allow me to stay focused. Because what I'm doing through all of this, I'm like, oh, cool. From 20 feet away, let's pretend, and I encourage you as a writer to always do this when you're writing scenes. Pretend you're somebody who's sitting, and especially with a conversation like this, pretend you're sitting with them, and then pretend you're another person standing 20 feet away where you can't hear the words being spoken. You can only observe body language and what's going on. And this is what writers, and I should mention this more often. It just really hit me this week. The reason I mention that is I'm half listening to what they're talking about always in every scene. Every audience member does this. We're half listening to what they're saying, but we're half or more looking at their faces and wondering what they're thinking and wondering how they're feeling. Because here's the reality. We're still in a situation where Julius would really wish she wasn't there. And Ramona, even though she's got these powers, she still doesn't have a fucking clue what she's doing yet, but she's got to be here. So there's that dynamic always at play. And I love that that's in the background. So I'm like, oh, cool, they're having a conversation. But meanwhile, what's going on with that reality that Julius would really rather she wasn't there? And what about those things that Dick told her about him that made her feel sort of a slight, tinge of sympathy? You've been laying down, in other words, these invisible emotional markers throughout the story. And sometimes writers forget that's what they're doing because they're in such a hurry to get people to say shit and do things. The audience is responding more to emotionally what's going on in a moment. Often we're that person 20 feet away who can't hear the dialogue, and we can only see how Julius is looking at her or she's looking at him. And I feel like if I was one of the crew members on this thing, one of the werewolves, and I kind of saw them blow up at each other earlier, and heard, maybe Julius talking with Baker and everything else. If I was watching this conversation from 20 feet away, unable to hear the words, I feel like as one of the werewolf guys, I would be going, oh man, it looks like they're kind of Okay, they're not blowing up each other. They're kind of getting along now. Okay, maybe this will work. Simple as fucking that in the background while this is going on. So I like that we're getting this conversation. We're seeing them bond a little bit. We're getting some cool information about what is going on. The big thing that's now in my head is what Julia said. We may need these defenses. So the big bomb under the table that I'm really interested in now is that. Why does he think we need these defenses, even though other people think they might not? So the ticking bomb.
Because the entirety of the last chapter was walking around looking at corpses.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Oh yeah, there's no question. Julius has we already know when Julius says, I'm just gonna throw up a few extra defenses just in case. I'm already in my mind going, that's fucking right you are, Julius, because I'm pretty sure there is shit coming based on what you've discovered already. So it's so good. But my point is this: the sooner you can get to that thing that apparently is going to be happening, the better. Now, it doesn't have to happen the next page or the next minute, but what I normally wouldn't want to see is a whole bunch of dialogue and explanation and information coming next, and then finally a thing happening. Which, sort of just a little thing here before we get to that. When he says I was part of an immortality experiment, that was the first time I sort of went, what? Because it feels like it sounds like something Julius wouldn't bring up, given what Dick told her. And
Yeah, I'm looking at that now. I'm thinking I should have cut that.
I think, and you can play with it because you've already planted it with Dick. He says, World War I, born 1915, and then something happened with my parents. But anyway, we gotta I don't mind you dropping just a little nugget without any detail, because if somebody said to me I was part of an immortality experiment, with my parents, but we can't talk about that right now, let's go do something else, I'd be like, whoa, dude, what? That's sort of like saying, yeah, my parents kind of, gave me to scientists, and or whatever the deal was. Like, it's just a big thing to drop. So I would just suggest, he alludes to it, but then just carries on. Because he looked weird that he would say that this weird thing happened and then say I can't talk about it. Here's where it got a little lumpy for me, is from this point forward, because from page, where are we here? So about halfway through page 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then I'm like, okay, and then we get to page 6. Now I recognize the stuff. I don't want to be trivial about 2 to 5, but page 6 is where I finally went, we're back in the story. Good. Because what happens starting on page 2, and my thought is, I'm just going to cut right to the chase and say, this is all interesting to me, but this is the sort of the definition to me of perishable information. It feels like a lot of stuff I'm learning about aura of growth, tree speak. There's auras again, making plants attack. This is good. This is all cool. Training wand, and so on. What I would be interested in, I don't even know what I would suggest per se, but it sort of the converse. There's 3 things about this conversation that I would invite you to consider. What it feels like, we've had this beautiful conversation between the two of them up until this, and now it sounds like 2 computers talking to each other, because Hayden needs information to get to the reader at this point. So it just suddenly, they didn't feel like, it's sort of like, and it felt like she was again embracing it too quickly. And if she can embrace the information quickly, but it still feels like she should react to it. So he's sort of like, let's talk about your magical abilities. I already know about the super strength. Anything else? Well, I can make plants grow around me, and I can talk to trees. I know of both abilities. First one. So they're not talking like people anymore. They're talking like to AI having a conversation. Which is good. Again, first draft, totally cool. Because what I feel you're doing is, you're like, I haven't figured out how they should say it yet. I just know this is the information I want them to say. So if it's a bit lumpy now, forgive me, Paul, which would make sense to me. Like, if you're just sort of taking a stab at it. Because what I'm really interested in, what I loved about Ramona in your previous chapters, is she discovered her powers not by having a teacher sit down and give her a lecture on what her powers are, but through the act of using them. She was like, oh shit, that's way more fun to read. And so my thought was, you might want to just cut to the chase and let this conversation wrap up about the thing. Let him I go to the bit with his parents, and that makes him uncomfortable. So he says, I got to check out here's a wand, like, like maybe he gives her like two, right. I don't have time to explain auras and tree speak and all of the stuff that the audience is going to forget later anyway. My suggestion would be give her something to play with at this story. You know what? I got to go do some stuff, but here's a wand. What do I do with it? Well, here, I'll tell you, and give her one thing to do. And he gives it to her. He gives her the wand. Sort of you're alluding to this now. He gives her the wand because he thinks this is all you can do with the wand. And then she does that thing. She does it, tries it 2 or 3 times, and it doesn't work. And then she does it. And then she discovers a new, because she's Ramona. She's got potentially powers that nobody else holding this wand would have. And so she's like going full Hermione plus. And when Julius comes back, it's like, I didn't know they could do that, right? like that could be fun. And in other words, I want to see action because I've had 2 pages of conversation. I don't want 3 more pages of conversation and then 2 more pages of seeing somebody practice with a wand before the action begins. So you could play with it. You could have him, like I say, hands of the wand because he's got stuff to do. He doesn't want to talk. Maybe Dick, maybe this conversation about, I would double down on this. I would say I would let this conversation go to a question from Ramona. You were alive during World War II and World War I, huh? What about your parents? Are they still alive? Of course she might ask a question like that because she's naive and she can get away with it, right? Are your parents, does that mean, wait a minute, if you're that old, are your parents still alive? At which point Julius is like, yeah, I got to go pack some stuff. Dick, you want to take it from here? Show her the wand. And he fucks off. And Ramona's like, should I not have mentioned that? And Dick can be like, yep. So moving on. So in other words, you're reintroducing some conflict. You've had 2 or 3 beautiful pages where Ramona and Julius are talking to each other like colleagues and peers, and it's so good. She asks a dumb question innocently about his parents. He takes off. Tells Dick to do the, so Dick has to give her so Dick gives her a quick lesson on what to do with this wand. Little thing, simple thing. Yeah, make that thing levitate. I mean, it could be whatever. She discovers a new use for it, which will become useful when the insects attack, which I would bring that insect attack like closer to like page 4, if there's any way to do it. We don't need to see her doing a whole experiment. Let her experiment and learn what it can do in the act of dealing with the insects would be my suggestion. So in other words, the training wand immediately becomes an action wand because she's going to be training herself through the action of it. I would love that. I would love to see Ramona be given like 5 seconds worth of training and then suddenly have to figure it out in battling or combating, whatever. If that's something you're willing to experiment with.
Okay.
Do you want me to write any of that down here? Would that be useful? Or
I'm recording it all, remember?
Oh, perfect. Of course. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, and I think that was the only hiccup I felt was a general one, was just I feel like we could get to the action quicker and still achieve what Hayden's trying to achieve.
So Ramona, like going out to find the dogs, the locusts attacking,
Love
Julius
all of
going
that.
out to rescue Ramona, all that's fine?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the only thing I would do is consider ways to, because it looks like when I got down to here, sorry, my mouse is being a bit of a dong. Where was it? Oh yeah, the way I'm assuming some of this here was still very much kind of in progress because it's flipping in back and forth between past tense and present tense, and it feels like more stream of consciousness. You're putting down what could happen rather than, in some cases, rather than exactly how to write it. Am I right?
Kind of, yeah. So that part where she gets the bark skin up and running?
Yeah, that's cool too. I love that you did that. I thought that was a really cool touch. Yeah, it just felt like it was sort of, you were still sort of smoothing out exactly how you wanted to write it, because it sort of went back and forth between, it felt like you were thinking on a page rather than writing. So like, and then this happens, and then this happens, and that's good. I love that. I would rather it was a hot mess and you got the gist of it out. So that would be my only recommendation, Hayden. What I'm loving about this is that we're starting the chapter off on kind of a soft moment between Ramona and Julius that still feels real. And he's being protective. It's not like a deep conversation or anything. He's just saying, yeah, I got to protect this place. So the focus is on him, kind of like Joel and Ellie in Last of Us. It feels like, Julius isn't trying to have a conversation with Ramona. He's trying to protect the area that they're in, but she is naturally asking questions. And because she's the one initiating this conversation, which follows beautifully from your previous chapter, she's got some sympathy for him. She wants to get to know him better. So she's naturally asking questions, including the question too far about his parents, which causes him, I would suggest, to walk away. He was going to give her a lesson with the wand, maybe he just hopes that that'll shut him up. You want to give her a lesson with the wand? I got shit to do. She practices, the attack comes. We see her yet again prove her ability, even though she doesn't really know what she's doing, to suddenly improvise, and plus she has power. So it's a really delightful opportunity to surprise us with, because Julius is surprised, Dick is surprised, the whole team is surprised. Shit, Ramona's surprised by what she can suddenly do that we didn't know she could do before, and it's all from your brain. So how exciting it is for literally everybody in this particular part of the story, as well as the reader, to be going, oh my God, what's happening? This is crazy. That's my favorite thing in stories. Food for thought. But I love the flow, man. Like, your pacing. If you could do this kind of thing throughout your story, because there's so much information to share with the audience, but what you're doing here in these first couple of pages, where you're like, nope, I'm only going to give the audience a little appetizer, just a little morsels, because you're a big brain. I'm not saying that to be facetious. You've got this gigantic imagination, and you're, in my opinion, you're definitely the kind of person who can underestimate how overwhelming that can be for other people, for you to just do a brain transfer. Like, you're like, think about this and this and this and this. And you're like, Hayden, I can't keep up. And you're like, come on, man, run. So this feels like you're walking, and you're walking with me. And I love the flow. That's all I got.
Oh, so we didn't get to chapter 13 then?
Nope. No, I actually took about 15 extra minutes to go through chapter 12. So we went a little over with 12, but I'll send you the notes on this. I'll read 13. Unless you send me 12. I'd love to see a sort of a cleanup of this chapter, because I don't think you're far. I want to see what you do with it based on the conversation we've had. I feel like a session, maybe a session and a half, and you've got this thing ready to publish.
Yeah, so I'd say the big two things are fixing up Julius's thing with his parents, fixing up the magic. So no magic discussion, or
I feel like it's all information I need eventually. And I feel like when we start to see her really manipulate nature and stuff like that, the challenge for me is that it felt like we went from a real human moment to a weird class where an AI was teaching another AI. And I didn't see its immediate relevance. And I felt like I was waiting a long time for the action to begin, and there was no conflict. So yeah, if you do that kind of a thing, potentially you may have other options. But if she eventually asks the question, because this is again a scene about him trying to establish the fort, the camp, whatever you want to call it, and her asking questions because she wants to get to know him better. As long as you're clear on that's what's happening emotionally, and he seems to be opening up and willing to talk a little bit, but then she asks a question that shuts him down and fucks him off. Gets a brief little thing with the wand, and almost as soon as she starts using it, like a page, as soon as she starts using it, she starts
I'll
getting
just have her blow the wand up, and then boom, she has bark skin.
Yeah, I would get to Ramona starts getting weird vibes by no later than the bottom of page 3. No later. That would be my recommendation. And by the time we get to page 4, shit is going down. That would be my recommendation. And you probably shorten the chapter up a bit too, but that's tight. That's tight. That's the kind of thing people are going to go, oh crap. But again, I really love the idea that she is blowing everybody's mind, including her own, with this thing that she's doing with the wand that you're not supposed to be able to do with this wand or something. I don't know what it is, but
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so chapter 13, just a heads up, that's the chapter where Ramona freaks out because bugs just tried to eat her alive.
I love that when you talk about her body being knit back together and stuff like that. Yeah, this was really, really tasty. Not to be gross.
Also, for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to have Julius give her. I'm weighing on whether or not I want Julius to give her a potion that will strip the emotions from her memories, so she doesn't get PTSD from this, but then
Mm,
develops a drug problem, or if I just should let her develop PTSD from this.
it's a good question. I'll leave that with you. I don't have a strong feeling.
Okay. See you next week, Paul.
Okay, good luck. I'll email this to you right away.
Will do. Bye bye.
Take care.
Leave me. Oh.